Frost Collective. He started out in design by undertaking doctoral research on resolving wicked problems using conversation and co-design. On completion, he went and honoured his consulting skills at Second Road, a strategic consultancy recently purchased by Accenture. In 2017, he co-founded Pivot, the business strategy and innovation unit within Frost Collective. Over the last 12 months, he has worked with a range of clients, including Macquarie, CBA, Telstra, UTS, University of New South Wales, and New South Wales Family and Community Services. Dreu enjoys bringing insights from outside into businesses, drawing on humanities and design to drive more innovative outcomes for his clients. So, Dreu, come on up.
Thank you. Oh, I forgot I sent that picture and I regret it. It's like the 10-foot stair in a 5-foot room, you know. Smolder. And my colleagues are here, which I also regret telling you about this event. So, now that we got that out of our system. So yeah, as introduced, I'm Dreu. Just to give you a little bit of context about Pivot, because I respect that there's a strong focus on interaction design here. Pivot, we really focus more on what you would recognize as strategic design and organization design. So we work a lot with clients, helping them craft strategies and then translate those into business models and operating models and service models. But I'm hoping in terms of what I share that, I mean, you're all very smart people. I'm going to take that as given, and that's the great thing is I'm sure you'll be able to make connections between what I'm saying. So if you're not in strategy and org design, I still feel, I hope, as an act of faith, there's something here for everyone. So I want to focus this evening on thinking about how we as designers can be better at telling and testing stories. And I think it's interesting when you think, looking at the scope of design is incredibly expansive. You know, you can design symbols, you can design artifacts, you can design services, you can design organizations, you can design experiences, you can design all manner of things. And so that's interesting because when you think, well, what does it take to tell stories as a designer? There's such an expansive array of things that can be designed. It means there's an incredibly expansive way of telling stories. You know, yes, we can work with images, we can work with words, but we also structure experiences, we make places, we create organizations. And so I guess one of the things I want to try and do tonight that's a little bit unusual is rather than thinking about how do we tell stories about the things that we design, I want to try and come from the angle of saying, how do we think about the things we design as though they were stories? How do you think about an artifact as a story? How do you think about an organization as a story? How do you think about a strategy as a story? How do you think about technology as a story? Now, in saying that design is expansive, this is actually also a bit of a warning, which is to say that design, in some ways unfairly, will be judged on 3 criteria, not just 1. Because design sits at the interface of business and culture. And so on the one hand, we would want our stories to be useful. We want to influence real world behavior. We want them to be engaging. We want to have dialogue with culture. And we want them to be creative. We want to make shared value for business and for government and society. Now that's quite a lot to ask any team of people to do, however talented and committed. So it's good in a sense that we go, wow, because we're designers, we have these expansive possibilities for telling different types of stories with all these different objects. But we're also going to be judged quite severely in that it has to meet all of these 3 criteria. So what does it mean to say that we could take whatever our object of design is? I want you to think, what is it that you design? What is it you work with each day? What would it mean to treat that as a story? Let me see if I can illustrate what I mean. At this year's Good Design Awards, the Husky Cup received an award within the product design category. And its blurb states this: visually iconic and functionally sophisticated, Husky Cup's materiality boasts a unique eco-composite polymer which features coffee husk as a raw material. Which is great. I think they nailed it. Now, Husky Cup is a great example of where the whole conversation around sustainability and the circular economy is leading us. So I think it is an exceptional design, and I'd used it before and was really glad when that team won. But all I'm doing at this point is telling you a story about Husky Cup. What would it mean to think about Husky Cup as the story? So the feeling of surprise when you first see the shape, both familiar and yet refined. The way its folds both draw the eye and invite the hand to pick it up, and very practically distribute heat. Its unusual weight and texture matched to bewilderment because you can't quite place what it's made of, which prompts you to ask the barista. The moment of delight when you realize that the design team behind it has closed the circle, that they've transmuted waste into a working object. You see, that was my experience of Husky Cup the first time I encountered it in the wild. And I think it shows some of the ways that objects can be story-like. And to state that more clearly, I think the Husky Cup demonstrates what Devon and Austin in their very good book. I'm always recommending books to people, so yeah, you can all download it on your Kindle and forget about it because that's what happens. But their book, The Soul of Design, I feel so guilty for keeping Amazon in business, but I can't stop myself. I digress. In their book, The Soul of Design, they talk about the role of form and story in objects, and they say this: we experience form when we perceive and expect, when we check our expectations against the actual shape the maker composed. Eventually, in a coherent form, the shape achieves closure that brings all of its parts together. Often this closure will surprise us. The form that we perceive is not the one we anticipated, but something better. A person will naturally feel affect, or we could say would feel empathy, intense emotion during the experience of the relationship between anticipation, realization, and closure. Anticipation, realization, and closure. Beginning, middle, and end. Possibly the most basic constituents of a story. So I think what they've done is summarized in a beautiful way that an object can be a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. We anticipate the object when we see it. We realize the object as we handle it. It moves us to closure, and all of that happens in seconds. So you can actually think about anything we build as a story with, as I say, anticipation, realization, and closure. So just to recap, that's kind of the bar I'm setting tonight. It's less about how do we tell stories. There will be some of that. But storytelling is usually told primarily through words and images, and that's absolutely part of the design toolkit, but design working with materials goes beyond even that. So the challenge I'm setting is how do you, whatever your materials are, how do you bring the logic, the insights of story to make things better, to make things well? Now, a good place to try and understand this is just to ask, well, what are principles for good storytelling? What are models? And even a brief search online, thank you Google, or a chat with colleagues, will lead you to Joseph Campbell and his idea of what's called the monomyth. So Campbell put forward this idea that there's a single story form that recurs across different cultures and at different times. And the single story is always concerned with the figure of a hero, and it takes the form of a journey, a going away and a returning. And it can be a physical journey or it can be a spiritual journey. But analysing many, many different myths, he came to recognise this fundamental pattern that kept emerging. And the idea of the hero's journey spread rapidly after he published his book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, in 1949. And his work, and that particular work, has had a huge impact on culture. Very narrowly, Campbell extended the field of comparative mythology. That's what he was. He was an academic. And he opened up further ways of psychoanalyzing and reading mythology. Secondly, he directly inspired central works of popular culture, most famously George Lucas's Star Wars. Now, I'm not actually going to talk tonight about what the hero's journey is, but if you've seen Star Wars, you know what it is. And if you haven't seen Star Wars, oh my God, that's your homework. No, there is no shame here. Well, if there is, it's mine. So Lucas even described Campbell at one point as my Yoda, which is a little weird. But, it's kind of high praise indeed, in that for him, Campbell and this idea of the hero's journey fundamentally informed the entire mythos, the entire story arc of Star Wars. So far, so good. But there is a third way in which Campbell's work spread. Consultants who never met a field of knowledge they couldn't pillage found in Campbell a solution to one of their major problems. You see, storytelling is one of the most effective ways we have to solidify and unify people and to perpetuate our culture. So when you see leaders everywhere, they're always like, I want to be good at storytelling because it does the culture thing, right? So people want to be good at it, and if they want to be good at it, they'll pay money. Consultants. So we're like, awesome. And it turns out that, here's a tip. If you're a good consultant, you find out something that's really, really effective, but really, really hard, and you make it easier for people to do. And then you charge money for that. I know, right now you're like, blows my mind. There's nothing wrong with doing this. I do it every day. Except when you're tempted to bastardize the source material and skip the actual hard work of translation. So basically, Joseph Campbell became the face that launched 1,000 miserable PowerPoint decks. That's right, you came here tonight to hear a talk on story, and all you're going to leave with are these lousy slides. Now, we wound up here because the commercial impulse that drives business overwhelmed Campbell's work and simplified it, and basically lied to us about what it takes to tell a good story. Good storytelling actually makes demands of us. So the hero's journey was broken into stages and really, really bad circular diagrams on Google Images. The better to lend itself to write-by-numbers hacks. There was no art and very little science left by the time the consultants were finished. So my critique here, what I'm saying is that the danger, it's great to engage with Campbell's material. But the reason the title this evening is going beyond the hero's journey, I don't mean going beyond Joseph Campbell, I mean going beyond what consultants did to Joseph Campbell. Okay. So my question is, yes, it's good to look at models, it's good to learn about theories, but how do you avoid applying them mechanically? Because that's actually the mistake of what happened. There's nothing wrong in reading a book and producing. I think it was Michael Porter who once said the job of consultants is to make powerful oversimplifications. You just have to do that. That's how people learn. So there's no shame in that. But there is an art of going, when have I simplified, yes, but still maintain the essence of what I'm communicating? And when have I just traded away all the actual meaning and goodness and come up with an empty form? And the hero's journey, by and large, has become an empty form. So we have to go beyond it. And my argument would be we need to return to the notion that storytelling is an art. And an art has rules, and it requires practice, and it can be learned, and in enough time it can be mastered. That's what it means to be an art. Now, I can't cover the whole art tonight, sad face. So instead, because you obviously want to listen to me for that long, so instead I'm going to focus on one of the key elements of the art of storytelling, which is the invention of realistic characters. If we as designers are to become better at telling and testing stories through objects, whatever our object of design is, we must become better at making them characters. characters that resonate, characters that feel real. Which is why I really enjoyed coming off the back of that whole VR thing, you know, the idea of what is real, what resonates, what generates empathy. That is the business we're in. So what does it mean to make a character? Way too many rhetorical questions, I'm realizing at this point. To explain what I mean, I'm going to unpack with an example from Greek mythology, because why the hell not? And then I'm going to give you two examples from the work that we do in Pivot and at Frost Academy. Sing, goddess, the anger of Peleus' son Archelaus and its devastation. So opens Homer's Iliad, a myth of the Eastern Mediterranean Bronze Age that today is regularly admired as a classic, at least in literature. Because I don't know what Brad Pitt was doing in that movie, but the less we talk about that, the better. You know, sing goddess. What's the deal with that peroxide? So Adam Nicholson explains what continues to attract people to read Homer and perform Homer. He says, as Homer is a foundation myth of the way of thinking by which the Greeks defined themselves, the frame of mind which made them who they were, one which in many ways we have inherited, the we there being predominantly the Western tradition. But under globalization, Homer's definitely circulating. So Homer encapsulates a Greek way of thinking. Now, I promise this is my last big quote. It's the big theory chunk. Stay with me. I will give stories. But this is a little bit elaborate, but I'm going to unpack it. It's like the trigger warning. The literary critic Era Auerbach has this to say: in a single act, the poet Homer's fantasy creates the character and his fate. Observation and reason play a part. They enrich the scene and arrange it. But observation can do no more than register the chaotic abundance of material, while reason tyrannically cuts it to pieces, unable to keep pace with the shifting experiences. Homer's inventive gift carries within it a conviction that neither observation nor reason can wholly justify, although everything in his work supports it. The conviction that every character is at the root of his or her own particular fate, and that he or she will inevitably incur the fate that it is appropriate to him or her. I feel like I can sit down at this point because that practically explained itself. But, yeah, you know when they said stay in school? I took that way too seriously. Way too seriously. But what I want to draw your attention to in this quote is that Auerbach distinguishes three different human powers that enable us to tell stories. He says there's reason, there's observation, and there's invention. So let's think for a moment. On the one hand, there's reason. Now, reason is really, really useful. It allows us to impose or overlay systems on life. And this is really helpful. But it constantly risks sacrificing individuals to those systems, to labels, to stereotypes, because life is always exceeding our ability to order it. Life is just too abundant. So we can't capture it all. So we also know that we need observation. Now, observation embraces all the bustle, all the diversity, or the superabundance of life. And this is really helpful. But it risks descending into chaos because life always exceeds our ability to notice everything that's going on. So on the one hand, we have reason that gives us systems, stabilizes things, fixes things. It's very helpful, except that life isn't necessarily stable or fixed. And on the other hand, we have observation, which moves with things, which flows with things. But then occasionally we get vertigo or whiplash or feel ill because there's just too much. We feel overwhelmed. This is what Homer is working with, but according to Auerbach, the genius of Homer as a storyteller does not lie in the fact that his reason is superior or his observation is more acute than all of us. It's his capacity to invent, vividly invent. You see, Homer, applying the art of a storyteller, he doesn't try and communicate all of life. He knows that's not possible. Life is too vast. He gives just enough order and notices just enough detail so that we experience his story as unique. It's Achilles' story, but it's also relatable. It's our story. It's the human story. You see, invention draws on reason and observation, but goes beyond them. And it rests on what Auerbach calls a conviction. And I call it the Storytellers Conviction. And it's simply a conviction that says we know that life is not a story, life is life. But life makes sense when you read it as a story. And I make sense when I understand myself as an actor in a story. And I understand you when I understand you are also actors in a story and that we can tell the story together. What Homer recognized was that when a person acts, they communicate something of their nature. And when they continue to act, their deeds pile up and it carries them in a certain direction and it entangles them in certain events, which Homer from the outside calls their fate. This is what all good storytellers know but can't prove. We are constantly inventing character and fate. We are constantly looking at life and going just enough order but just enough detail, and I can tell a great story. There's an art in it. Now, Achilles demonstrates the storyteller's conviction. He is a hero in the sense that Joseph Campbell would recognize. He's a warrior king who's fighting for his tribe and who seems that like his highest aspiration is to die gloriously in battle, which seems fatally flawed to me. But that's because, I'm not a warrior king. Yet when we first encounter him in that opening line, sing goddess of the rage of Peleus' son Achilles or Achilles. It's his rage that's foregrounded. It's like when you look at Achilles, he has all these different features and all that, but when you go, what's his nature? What drives him? What motivates him? Where's his desire? It comes down to rage. It's his rage or his lack of rage that drives the plot forward or stalls it. He accumulates acts of violence and terror, but also acts of camaraderie, grief, love, and pity. His rage culminates in a tragic death and the promise that he will live on in his people's collective memory and also in substandard anatomical exercise books, because that's where we get Achilles' heel from. Being shot by an arrow in the heel. What a way to go. But it's a kind of immortality, props to him. To make Achilles real to us, to make him a real character, Homer doesn't just reason at a high level about war as a feature of human life, nor does he just act on eyewitness account after eyewitness account of what's happening. He draws on those. He reasons and he observes, but only to bring him to the point that he's convinced. And I think that in the same way that Homer writes a story, when we are asked to design for a user, that user can be treated as a character. And whether it's an object or a service or an organization, we can have anticipation, realization, and closure for that character. We imbibe something of what Homer does. Yes, we reason. Yes, we observe. But only to the point when we are convinced, and in a moment of synthetic clarity, we announce, this is the user, this is their desire, this will be their experience, this will be their end. Hopefully not their final end, but there you go. It's all brilliant and arrogant and fragile and hopeful. And one of my favorite quotations, and I'll just leave you to think about it because it's one of those things that bends your mind, which I like. Theodore Adorno once said, art, of which I would include storytelling, is magic freed from the lie of being true. That's what we're talking about. So enough waxing lyrical. How can we actually apply what I'm talking about? I'm going to close with two examples, two stories from our work at Pivot. One is going to be about strategy, and one's going to be about experience. So, using this model, reason, observation, invention. Working with a client, working on shaping the strategic intent for a digital experience play. Okay, big system overhaul, wanting to bring all the goodness that digital can offer in a smooth user experience and in a relatable user experience, so high hopes. Come into the room and you go, what's your vision? Now it's interesting. Organizations are full of reason. They will give you their vision, they will give you their values, they will give you their priorities, their pillars, their models, their canvases. And it's amazing because a funny thing actually happens in organizations, and I'm sure you've all spotted this, but it just amuses me. You basically realize that in some organizations, you reach the point where reality is defined by this document talks to that document, talks to that acronym, talks to that metric, talks to, and you're like, wow, now I know why we need human-centered design. Right? But this is the thing, in terms of vision, right, they have vision, but it has no intensity, no specificity. How many of you have had the moment when you're opening a procurement pack or when you're talking to a client and they're like, here is our vision. And without doing a disservice, obviously I'm not going to name the client I was working with, but I believe it had actually been crafted by another group. But when I said to them, what's the vision? They said, we want people to be able to connect online and communicate with each other. And fortunately, I had a good relationship with the client because I'm an inveterate smartass. I went, great, you want people to use the internet, fairly certain that's already been done. And fortunately, they laughed and I wasn't fired, so there is an end to the story. But the point, we both laughed because, of course, they're smart people. They're well aware that this reason on its own in organizations produces true statements and good statements that are also empty statements. Do good. Whatever the hell that means. Be open. Except when you're not. And they're set so high that we can't really disagree with them, firstly because we're not sure what they mean, and secondly because if you pitch it high enough, how can you reject it? Right. So I'm going, okay, so there's all of these things I have to get my head around. So immediately you go, well, we need to turn to observation. And in this case, you kind of go, well, what's going on in your niche? Because strategy, one understanding of strategy is about the fit between an organization, a firm, and their environmental niche. And the idea of strategy is position taking. So you look at their niche and suddenly you're overwhelmed by detail. Look at what the competitors are doing. Look at the trends. Look at the new technologies. Look at the TED Talk I saw last night. You're assailed with detail. So suddenly we've gone from like the 50,000 foot, I can barely breathe and see anything to, wow, I'm lying face down on the ground being assaulted by paper, right? It's just like too much. So we have these poles. We've got these empty visions. Visions, I say it's kind of visions without intensity. And then details without focus. And my job as a strategist, and the job we try and do at Pivot is to go, we need to tell a story. We need to look at both of these things and hold that tension and invent the organization as a character. And the way you do that is you look at the idea of identity. And there was a moment in a workshop that we were running where basically, you could tell the group, me telling you this won't make it any easier, but it is something of a steer where we were trying to go, what is it that we would actually aspire for this organization to do and be? How would we name the outcome and the reason behind overhauling a digital platform and offering a different kind of experience? And that's not easy to do because you're surrounded by cliches. So we're trying to do it, and immediately I'd clocked it, and I was just about to say it, and then the client, to their credit, also clocked it, and they went, you know what? We haven't thought enough not just about where we are and where we want to be, which are the classic strategic questions, but who are we? And what would be possible if this is who we are and where we are right now? Strategy has this horrible tendency to get overheated, and then it turns into spin and PR. So the genius of what they said, it was the shift from going not where are we, but who are we right now? And one of the techniques we have for this in Pivot is very often when we go, we're often working at a very senior level, so kind of GMs and C-suite. So we always try and ask to talk to two people. They don't always approve it, but that's fine. One is if the founder of the company's there, you would want to talk to them because they carry history and memory of the organization in a unique way. They embody it as a founder. But the other thing you do is either if you can't talk to them, you go and say, introduce me to the person who's been here the longest. I want to interview them. Why? Because identity is a function of memory and imagination. And when strategy becomes unmoored from history and memory, the who am I, and I know who I am because I've had these experiences leading to this point, and they've shaped me, and they express who I am, and they define me, and they mark me, and some of them wound me, and some of them were great. When you have that grounding of strategic conversation, then it makes sense to turn around and go, if this is who you are, if this is your core attribute, what do you think is possible and where do you want to go? And it kind of hovers, as I say, in that middle between the emptiness of just, we will be awesome, we will be different. Please don't ask me how. Versus, oh, trend, squirrel, right? So we're trying to find the middle. And the schema I like to use is this very quickly is to work on a strategy with a group of people at the level of their experiences to introduce history, which I say is the past in the past. It's the stuff before anyone was alive or present. There's memory, which is past in the present. It's the things that people can tell, the folklore, the stories where they're like, this is how things work around here. Or, I remember when this happened. Then there's the present, which is analysis. And then there's imagination, which is the future in the present, which is if we stand here reaching forward, how far do we think we can go? So there's history and memory and analysis and imagination. And the work of strategy is to use those as a bridge between the details and the ideas, between the observations and the reasons. Second example, designing experiences. This one kills me. There are certain models, and that they are well known in their academic form, but they actually persist at an almost subliminal level where we would say, there's a view that says people are all the same. We are all money-hunting animals. Or we are all maximizers of our utility. Anyone had rational choice theory inflicted on them, or am I the only one? Right? There's this funny thing. So let me unpack for you what it means to say that we are utility maximizing animals, which just looks great on a business card. What it means is you know what you want and you spend all your time calculating how to get it. And then the awesome overlay of capitalism is to assume that what we want is money. Thank you very much. I've now solved the riddle of human existence. We are animals who know what we want, which is money. And so now my job as a designer is just to help you get there. Now, to use Auerbach's point, it's almost like in the face of the diversity and the abundance of human beings, reason just wants to go, stop, too much. Look, here's what you are. Hit pause. You are a utility maximizing animal. You are a money hunting animal. Proceed. It just cuts the world into these ridiculous oversimplifications. And this is one of the good things that behavioral economics is doing, is it's starting to disturb some of that, at least in academic circles. So we can't just live in a world of models, economic models. So what do? We use the tools of contextual inquiry and interviews, and we go and talk to real life people, which is a nightmare. Because it turns out we went in thinking everyone was the same, and we found out everyone is different. That in fact, and this to me is the primary flaw of the idea of saying I'm a utility maximizing animal. What did I say? I know what I want. My main job is calculating it. How many of you know what you want? How many of you feel that what you want is not going to change in the time it takes you to raise your hand? So we're not utility maximizing animals, we're these desiring animals, and it's like the object of our desire keeps shifting, and some of us in an existential moment of angst will even go, is there an object that can meet my desire? Okay, that's pretty heavy. But the point is, you talk to people and you understand that, I mean, maybe in a formal sense, you can go, yes, people are maximizing their utility, but the more interesting question is, what are they actually pursuing? What do they actually want? And some people want truth, and some people want enlightenment, and some people want status, and yes, some people do want money, and some people want beauty, and some people want what they want. But once again, to quote Auerbach, now we're in danger of being drowned by chaos, because it's too overwhelming. So what do? We have to turn to meaning. The art of the storyteller is to sit there between I'm a utility maximizing animal and I'm a desiring animal who doesn't know what they desire or doesn't persist in what they desire. And we have to go, what's the meaning? In the same way that for Homer, as diverse and interesting as Achilles is, he made rage the primary meaning. Can you imagine for a moment, just quick thought experiment? The next time you go to a workshop and someone goes, these are our values. You know, if you ran that exercise with Achilles, what he'd say? Rage. Never had that happen, but it's good to have hope that one day something like that interesting will happen. But the point is, we synthesize data into insights and we uncover a range of fundamental meanings. And this is to tell you how we experienced this at Pivot very recently. We were working with a client, once again, can't name them, but we had interviewed, was it like 35, almost 40 people. I think we had like 3,500 data points. I committed the cardinal sin of actually switching from using Post-it notes to run affinity mapping to using Excel, because there were so many data points and I couldn't be bothered writing them all out, neither could the team. So, huge amounts of data. And we did the thing that you have to do when you're a designer, you know this, when you've got all that data, is you lock yourself in the room and you tell someone on the outside, if I look like I'm leaving, bar the door. Because we need to crack this, right? And my colleagues over there, they were with me in the room, and I think it was about day 3. Right, and you were just looking at it going, where's the patterns, where's the patterns, where's the insights, where's the meaning? And I guess almost, not on a whim, I mean, you should never underestimate intuition, but we just basically said, let's go back over the data one more time. And Clarissa, who's our client engagement director, she and I were kind of chatting, and I said, look, just for fun, let's run a test. You take the first 2, I think it was the first 5 users, I'll take the second 5 users, and we'll just read them and just ask yourself the question, what's fundamentally driving this person? If you had to put it in a word, what's the meaning that impels this person? What are they looking for? What gets them out of bed? What drives them? What keeps them up? So we ran a little experiment, we found it started to work, so we kept going, eventually we went through a whole deck. And we came up with 6 fundamental meanings arising from a data set that applied to about 6,500 people. Now, here's the interesting thing that we did, and this is why I'm talking about this as the art of story. I have huge respect for statistics and the art of profiling, but I'm not actually talking about the here. What I'm talking about is making a persona in the original sense of that word, making a character, make your user a character. And what we realized was there were these fundamental meanings. And the interesting thing is, and this is in a way that you test the value of this, when it came time to ideate for these personas. It was really interesting because it went a step beyond just going, well, what are the pain points and how would we solve for them? And that's good, that's valid. In that it suddenly opens a field up where you're suddenly like going, what would it mean to give someone whose primary driver is beauty an experience of the service of this particular client? What would that mean? So for me, that ability to uncover a fundamental motive or meaning is the way that a storyteller makes a character that walks between the line of just having an empty model, or on the other hand, having so much detail that we just can't act on it because humanity is gloriously diverse and far beyond our ability to clock it. So this is what I want to leave you with. You are inventors. You can be inventors and storytellers. People who perceive between reason and observation realistic characters. Homer peered into life and saw, beyond reason and observation alone, a pattern. And he named that pattern character and fate. In the same way, we peer into life and see beyond reason and observation alone a pattern that we name as identity and the fulfillment of purpose, or as meaning and the resonance of experience. To repeat one last time, we have the power to invent, an audacious power, a power that confers on us incredible responsibility and opportunity. And I hope that something of what I've shared with you this evening will help you seize that opportunity. Thank you.